We do have 3 of our 4 lovely panelists up here. We are waiting on one more, but she's going to join us as we start. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our panel discussing overcoming obstacles in leadership. Today, we welcome our lovely panelists, our in-person attendees, and everyone joining us on Zoom. My name is Kristin Fernandez, and I will be moderating. I'm Associate Counsel for the Michigan Attorney Grievance Commission. I also serve as the president of the Detroit Mercy Law Alumni Association and president of the Women's Bar Association, Oakland. Our panel is co-sponsored by the D&I committees for the Oakland County Bar Association, Women Lawyers Association of Michigan, Women's Bar Association, Oakland, and the State Bar of Michigan Young Lawyers section. Please note that the views and beliefs shared by our panelists and myself represent individual beliefs that are not representative of the overall views of the D&I committees for those organizations. Some of the questions and discussion we have tonight may be difficult. The most important thing I ask is that everyone be respectful and kind in sharing their questions and opinions. We do have Associate Dean of Student Affairs, Aisha Humphrey here, who has graciously offered to provide mental health resources to anyone who might need it after this discussion. So please know we do have that as a resource. And thank you, Dean Humphrey. And we do hope to save some time at the end for Q&A. So with that, let's get started. I'm joined up here by my lovely panelists, 3 of 4 right now, and I would love to give each of them a chance to briefly introduce themselves. So we can go down the line. Oh, okay, we'll start with Shirley, going down the line that way. Ms. Kaigler.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Shirley Kaigler, and I am a Detroiter, lifelong Detroiter. All of my training has been in Michigan. Proud graduate of Cass Tech. Attended Eastern Michigan for a couple of years, transferred to Wayne State, and then went to University of Michigan Law School, and later received my LLM, or I should say I earned my LLM at Wayne State University in tax. I've been practicing, next May, it'll be 50 years. So very, very proud of the decision I made to go into law before deciding law school. I was going to be a social worker, become a social worker, but I guess the counselor tag in my title indicates that I do a lot of that. I'm a state and trust lawyer, work with Taft Law, formerly Jaffe, Ray, Hugh, and Weiss, located in Southville, Michigan. But we work throughout the state, and Taft now has just almost 1,000 lawyers. So I moved from being a sole practitioner to a firm of almost 1,000 people. And my background is in tax, but I like the personal side of it. So for the first 2 years out of law school, I worked in an accounting firm. In fact, that was probably the only place a lawyer who didn't have an LLM, who wasn't a woman, who wasn't a man, who was a woman and a person of color, could get a job. Worked with Ernst & Young now. Well, it was in Arthur Young. Did that for 2 years, opened my own office, did that for 19 years in the estate and trust area. And then was recruited by Jaffe and have been with Jaffe, now Taft, for 28 years. So I have a diverse background, to say the least, but it is a wonderful practice.
Well, that's a hard introduction. Dr. Courtney Griffin, Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging here at Detroit Mercy Law. I'm a born and raised Detroiter. I absolutely love this city. Majority of my work and my research has been in higher education. I honestly like to say I went to college and I never left. But I really enjoy working in education. As a young Black woman in education, I'm excited about this conversation about obstacles because I've endured a couple of few, and I researched the area, so I'm excited for this conversation.
We got to the watered down introduction part of the section. So I'm so amazed at these lovely women. My name is Attorney Darnell Barton. I am former state prosecutor with Wayne County. I just said to Dr. Griffin, the reason why I went to law school was because of Trayvon Martin. And a mentor of mine said, excuse me, if you really want to basically help the system, go in where it's needed. And so that's what I did. Here, since then, I've been going out on my own. I also do criminal defense and civil rights defense. I'm also the State Bar Young Lawyers Association secretary. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of so many things that I just want to throw out to you guys, but I think we should probably just keep it basic for right now. So again, thank you guys for having us. I'm very honored to be here.
Thank you all. We definitely have a wealth of knowledge and experience up here, and we're excited to talk about it. As I mentioned at the top, we do have a fourth panelist who is on her way. Judge Laura Polizzi had finished her docket a little late, but she's on her way and she'll be here shortly. We'll let her introduce herself when she makes her appearance. So with that, we'll jump into our first question. And for this first question, I am going to direct it at each of our panelists. So our invitation to this event included a quote from RBG, who was in turn quoting Sarah Grimm. I ask for no favor for my sex. All I ask of our brethren is that they take their feet off our necks. To our panelists, what was your first experience with a foot on your neck, so to speak? And put differently, when did you realize that there were systemic obstacles that you could face strictly because of your identity or your lived experience? Happy to start with you, Mr. Barton, or we can.
Sure.
Okay.
If that'll please, I always want to defer to you, just so you know. Okay. That's a great question. And even though they gave us these questions prior to, you still don't know how to answer when you get there. You want to read the room and all that, but I'm always going to be an open book. So in this case, I would say for me, it was in elementary school. So I didn't have to wait till law school. I went to, you know how you have to test to go into certain schools. So my mom ended up putting me into this school, and there were times I would be in class and raise my hand and the teacher wouldn't call on me. There would be times where there are other students getting rowdy and the teacher's looking at me. Very briefly, if I skip ahead, in law school, I did a program where we did a study for Dallas, Texas Independent School District, and we found that 53% of the suspensions were for young Black males. So aside from the actual substantive work that we would be missing, we're actually missing the most important work, which was socializing and communication skills, of which that is the industry we live in now. Not many people are building buildings, but there are call centers and customer service related jobs. So with that said, I learned at a young age, and because my mom was a teacher, she was on the fence a bit, like, oh, Darnell, that's, I wouldn't do that as a teacher. But she didn't realize what was happening until she got in there and was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, so I think that was my first experience with it, and learning that no matter what, even your parents may not be able to step in and save you because they don't know what's going on. And if I may very briefly, for the younger generation that's coming below us, we don't know the forms that racism takes as it mutates throughout generations. So while you're seeing it and we don't know, we're like, what's the problem? What do you mean? It's incumbent upon us as an older gen to look and say, okay, wait, explain it to me. And then for you to then in turn explain it to us, because we may not get it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Barton.
I don't think mine was as early as elementary school, but I will say it was probably when I stepped foot on Michigan State campus. So I mentioned I'm a born and raised Detroiter. And so with that, I'm used to went to school in Detroit and used to being a majority. And so getting to state, it was like, oh, wait a second, no, you're a minority here. And so that was my first instance of, oh, my experience is different. And I went into the classrooms and I went around campus and I was like, well, where are the students that look like me? Where are the faculty that look like me? Where are the administrators that look like me? And I struggled then and I was like, well, who do I confine into? Who do I, ask my stupid questions to? Like who, I felt like I was on an island alone because I didn't have that support. And so I think that's when I struggled and I realized like, oh, this is going to be different. I am different. And you make moves and you make new decisions from there.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin.
Well, my understanding of systemic racism occurred much earlier in the fifties and sixties. As a young child, I remember my dad working 2 jobs to support a family of 5 kids, and my mom didn't work. And so we worked 2 jobs to make sure we were well provided for. He had a very good job at Chrysler Corporation. A lot of people came from the South and worked in the North. And he was a military man, served in the Navy, joined it in 41. The war started, so he couldn't get out until 46. Moved to Detroit for a better life. And for until 1962, we rented a home because he couldn't buy a house, even though he had 2 jobs, and he was a veteran. Lots of veterans getting out of the military. That's how Detroit was built, with people being able to take the VA loan and buy a home. But that didn't apply to people of color. Black people could not. They didn't qualify for whatever reason, no matter how hard he worked. He couldn't get a loan until the Housing Civil Rights Act, and we were able to buy our first home in 1962. And so I knew then, as a young child, that something was wrong with that system, that everyone else who had been in the military was able to buy a home. So I knew very early on that things were different. I could watch television, see there were differences, who was on the screen, who wasn't, which families were featured, all of that. So I was not under any, misunderstanding about racism and systemic racism in Detroit. In fact, in the 60s in school, if you taught secondary education, you couldn't, and you were a person of color, you were Black, you couldn't teach in a middle or high school. The first African-American person, who's still a friend of mine today, she came to Tappan Junior High, and she taught at Tappan, first Black person I saw in a middle school. And so it was very obvious. Going to high school, at Cass Tech, I didn't, they focused me, though I was a very good student, very good test taker, to be a secretary, legal secretary. I could take shorthand, type, but there was no one gearing or pushing me towards a legal education. So I found the law myself. Now, there are a number of stories I can tell about what happened in the first year or second year of law school, et cetera, but I knew early on.
Thank you, Ms. Kaigler, and thank you all for sharing your experience. And building off that, what I want to now direct to each of you as well is, how did you handle or respond to those obstacles in the past? And has that changed from how you respond to those types of obstacles now? And I'll change the order on you, Mr. Barton. We'll go back to Ms. Kaigler, and please.
In response and I'll use my professional career, almost 50 years of practice. Initially, as a student, when I faced racism at the law school, what I focused on was making sure that no one else following behind me would ever have to go through that and feel alone. Because at Michigan, we were the first class after, you may have heard the history of the BAM strike back in the 70s. There were a BAM strike at Michigan. And so my class had 10% people, African Americans. There were 38 of us out of the 380 in that initial class. So we had a community, but it was not without challenges. It was, we just made our way. We fought against it, and then we were very fortunate at that time, Professor Edwards, Harry Edwards, who became a Court of Appeals judge, DC Circuit, was teaching there. So we had someone who invited us into his home, made sure we were welcome. Dean St. Antoine was a great guy. So we had a lot of support, but nothing that I felt related to professors reaching out, calling us after class, or being included. So you just did it anyway. Joined the student council, just introduced myself, barged into things, looked at someone's paper and asked, how did you get that? Where'd you get that horn book from? I didn't know what a horn book was. Where'd you buy it? Why'd you get it? And so it was just being curious and then friendly. So I used the opportunity to just be inquisitive, open, and reached out. And the one thing we did at Michigan, there were people like Saul Green, David Kathleen Lewis, there were just a lot of Nancy Blunt, Judge Blunt, there were just a lot of extraordinary people in the class. We formed a group, and it's still operating there, Michigan Black Law Alumni Society. We had the first event to invite our parents, but all the students and the professors who wanted to come to an event, and Judge Crockett, the senior Crockett, was invited to be the speaker. When he was at U of M, he was the only Black person in the class. He was amazed to see that many people there. But that was our goal, is to make sure the students and their families felt the community. And it just seemed there was buy-in from everybody else on campus. So I think the dinners now have about 500 or 600 people that come out. But we were fighting to make sure no one felt alone or excluded. And so it's created, I think, a different kind of environment. So just looking at that as an obstacle, but saying we're not going to let it define us. And
It's amazing.
that's
Thank
how
you.
I handled it then.
I would say my experience was similar in that I had to seek out support. And so I had to figure out who was on my team and who wasn't on the team. And so I remember, again, going through campus and looking for individuals that looked like me. And I was like, okay, well, obviously that's a failed mission. Let me just find somebody who I can connect with, someone who seems familiar, someone who's open to have conversation, and then
I'll continue.
and then go from there. And so I remember, like, one instance, I ended up finding a Black woman. She was in the college, she was in a Lyman Briggs college, and I was not a Lyman Briggs major. I did not major in the sciences, but she was the person that I found that I could just ask all my stupid questions to. And I remember having to truck all the way across campus just to have somebody to confide in, to ask the question. She's like, well, how have you tried this? Have you thought about this? And so I attribute a lot of my success to her and being able to be comfortable with her. But then I also think about other people who I reached out to for support. And I remember talking to one of my professors when it was time for me to graduate. And I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting a master's degree, or I'm thinking about doing this. And he was like, well, you wouldn't want to be overqualified. I don't know if you should do that. And so again, having to weed out who is on your team and who isn't on your team was, part of the strategy. So I learned that, but now I would say I'm becoming the person that I needed. And so anyone who's ever heard me talk has always heard me say, like, I have 5 college degrees. And I don't say that in like a pompous way. I say that to say I have 5 college degrees and I've never had a Black woman as a professor. And that's problematic. I believe in representation. And so, you have to be able to see yourself in a place to know that that is an option for you. And so before coming to Detroit Mercy, I was at DePaul, and I talked there, and it was, but you could see both the confused faces and the elated faces when the students came into the classroom, and they're like, oh, wait, you're the professor? And I'm like, yeah, I'm your professor. And so using that as a way to be that person that, students can find me and ask their stupid questions, to be able to support them, to lead them on their way, is how I've managed that.
Thank you. And we'll let Mr. Barton answer, and then Judge Polizzi, I'd love for you to give a brief introduction.
Sure.
Thank
Which
you.
question?
Oh, I'm sorry. We are finishing up question 2, and then we'll
Okay.
move to 3. Thank you.
So how do I handle or respond to these things? So I'm originally from South Jamaica, Queens, New York. So for me, I wrote down here and it says crash out. That's usually how I would respond. I say that with all jokes, but in reality, it's not joking because what I would do is a professional crash out, which means that I'm gonna go be very versed in whatever the problem is, so that when I come back to you, we are gonna have this issue and we're gonna solve it professionally though. I'm not gonna disrespect you or do anything, but we're gonna address whatever this problem was. So when I was in law school, making it very brief, the school had its favorites, of people who were, and I'm not accusing this school, I'm saying they had their favorites of, oh, well, this person's gonna be on the Court of Appeals one day, and, all the rest of you guys, just get out of their way. And I had a problem with that because there were, and I think I mentioned this to you, one of my mentors in law school, her name was Vicki Blanton. She doesn't have male mentees. Only reason why she took me on was because there was a young woman who had a problem, a young Black woman who had a problem in our law school as a representative of a student organization. And she had a problem with the person who was leading the Women's Lawyers Association for the entire city. That person was kind of mean girling her, and I didn't like it. And I said something about it to my judge, who's now on the Texas Court of Appeals. She's a very, very great woman that I know and a mentor of mine. I love her to death. But when I told her what happened, she started making moves, and then we all came together and we confronted this woman. And that's how I ended up getting, I got a phone call. It's like, Darnell? I'm like, yeah. It's like, come to my office. I'm like, what was this? Vicki Blanton, and hung up. I'm like, what the hell? What just happened here? But I got the call from the Godfather, which was like, oh, okay, come. And now, so how do I handle it is, at the end of the day, you have to confront it, but you can do it in a professional way, and the results will just be the results. But what's not gonna happen is this continue.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Judge Polizzi, thank you so much for being here. We're so happy to have you. A huge congratulations on your election. And we'd love for you to give a brief introduction. And if there is anything that you wanted to add from question 1 and 2 that we went through, please feel free to do so.
Sure. I'm Judge Laura Polizzi. I was appointed by Governor Whitmer in May. And, well, I found out very quickly that I was appointed in May, had to shut down my private practice of almost 10 years in about a week and a half and take the bench. So took the bench and then found out that I had to run in an election. And then I found out that I had to fight to get my name on the ballot. So I fought to get my name on the ballot, and then I had to launch a campaign, which people usually launch way in advance. I launched a campaign in what was about the middle of June for the election in November. And thank God I was successful in what I did, but there is no success without hard work. The secret to success for me has always been working twice as hard as anybody else. And I'm the first person in my family that even got a bachelor's degree. I'm the first person in my family to become a lawyer. I didn't have anybody to ask questions to. I recently, and I'm just going to delve right into the beginning of these questions. I'm a woman. I fortunately, and this is not a brag, but fortunately for some things, I look younger than I am. But that's not to your benefit when you are becoming a judge. And it's not to your benefit when you're an attorney in private practice. Because I've walked into countless courtrooms where opposing counsels have snuffed their nose at me and said, oh, well, look at my opposing counsel. Maybe she looks like a bimbo, or she doesn't know what she's doing. Well, that's to their detriment. As well as when I became a judge, then I started knocking on people's doors, and people would say, you're not a judge. You're too young. Well, I'm almost 40 years old and I'm very qualified to do the job that I'm already doing. So You know, I'm also part Latina, so there's that as well. So I represent a community, of my own, which has been really wonderful, throughout the years of my practice. But, you know, we face adversity sometimes for strange things. In my recent election, I faced adversity because my opponent didn't have anything else negative to say about me. So he said, well, she doesn't know the law because she went to Cooley Law School. So I was even criticized for the law school I went to, even though I passed the same bar exam as everyone else.
Right.
So it just goes to show, no matter what you do, you'll still be criticized. So hold your head up high, be bold, and defend yourself.
Thank you, Judge Polizzi. And something that I heard across the board here was a lot of being the first, whether it be in your family or your community or what you were seeing, creating a community so that you did feel supported to do what you were set out to do and you were meant for. And really not letting others who come after you face the same kind of loneliness or feelings that you had. So kind of tying that into our next question, I wanted to direct this to Dr. Griffin and Mr. Barton, but if anyone else wants to add on, please feel free. What changes have you seen or would you like to implement to create a more accessible legal community?
If you'd like to, for sure.
Let's start with Dr. Griffin.
I would say I'm gonna always sound like a broken record because representation matters. We need more lawyers of color, we need more diverse lawyers, but we also need those attorneys to be accessible. We need them to be the mentors, the sponsors, to be able to support these younger generations and aspiring attorneys in order to create this community. As we think about, especially at Detroit Mercy, we have a large percentage of our students who are first generation. And so if you're first generation, then you don't have a roadmap. Again, you don't have the person to ask your stupid questions to. You may not have the financing to take the LSAT multiple times. So who is that person that can support you? Or who is that person who can work to create and diversify the legal field? So I would say we need more attorneys of color to be readily available to future and aspiring attorneys.
Agree 100. So I want to answer that question, but I just want to touch very briefly on what Judge Polizzi said about being a young lawyer, especially out here on your own and not being respected. I think that's part of why I'm on this panel, just to show the connection between, obviously I'm not a woman, or I don't identify as a woman, but we still have that same issue. So I think that was literally why I'm here. All right, have a good day. No, all jokes aside, as far as the changes that I would like to see, I'm always an action person and a put your money where your mouth is person. So I think I just said something the other day to somebody about, these firms, law schools, all government entities, whatever. If you want to see more diversity, invest. So don't go to the law school. Don't come here and say, hey guys, we're gonna, oh man, we don't have enough options. There weren't any resources. Go down to the high schools. Go to the high schools, set up programs, bring funding so that you can start to foster them from this stage all the way up until law school graduation. And if you really have the funds and accessibility, you go earlier than that in middle school. Because we all know statistically, middle school is where they start going left and right and setting themselves on the path for incarceration or not, So that would be my thing. Put your money where your mouth is. If you really want to do it, then go back to where the young people are splitting towards. I have to feed my family, or I had a friend when I went to college, his mom lost her job. So he said his financial aid check to her, but what's he gonna eat? So I'm making sure he eats. So now my check, but I didn't have anything to do with their family situation or the job or whatever it may be. But we as a community, again, when you're in certain communities, and it's not just Black people, certain communities could be whatever. You rely on each other. So if you have to take the slack for someone else. So my brothers in the Latino community, like my cousins are Puerto Rican. They tell me different things that they go through, and I'm just like, why? How? Like, they know that's an American like, you're still American, right? Like, they don't get it. So again, that's what I like to see. Go back and get those kids when they're young. Sorry for the rambling.
No, I loved it. I love the put your money where your mouth is. Judge Polizzi, Ms. Kaigler, yeah, please.
And that the mentorship, allyship is so important in this area. I failed to mention when I first sat down, that honor should be given kudos to Judge, the Honorable Jesse Slate. I did not know any lawyers when I was accepted, in Michigan. I got accepted, took the LSAT in November, accepted in December, in January. And so I said, oh my God, I'm going to go to law school, and I've never met a lawyer in person. So my husband, then boyfriend, said, well, I know one. Her name is Jessie Slayton. She's fabulous. So I called her, and I know she's an alum of this university. Her picture is downstairs. I missed it coming up, but I called her. She said, sure, come by the office. So we met, we talked, and she, during law school, took me out to lunch, introduced me to some of the other women lawyers who were in the office building she worked in. And periodically during the years while I was in law school, I'd get a little note, nice, perfumey, beautiful, stationery, that she just want to check in, see how I was doing. Made sure I called her during the holidays. But that meant all the world to me because she was truly the embodiment of what a lawyer should be, should look like. How she presented herself, how she groomed, how she related to people. And to see her walk down the street or in a building or somewhere, anywhere you were with her, people knew her, recognized her. And I said, I think I could do this. I just will follow whatever she did, whatever she said. I wanted to be just like her. So I believed in paying it forward. So from that point on, it was important, not only in helping the community, but also looking to people who were in school and who were now practicing lawyers. If someone called, sent an email, asked a question, I would always follow up because that was so important to me to give me that incentive that I could do it. Someone who believed in me, who had done it. She looked like me. That was really, really important.
It was only my first time meeting you, but I'll tell you, you do bring that energy, Ms. Kaigler. I will promise you that you do. Judge Polizzi, anything to add?
I think so far, and I'll just come at it from this perspective. So far as a judge, I've only been a judge since May, so a whole 10 minutes. But so far in my experience as a judge, I've gone to speak to two high schools, and that's been really rewarding. I actually was on a panel as well at Oakland University, and you know, people come up to you afterwards and they say to you, well, if you were the first person in your family, how did you get your first job in the legal profession? And I said, well, I walked into a courthouse. I walked up to the judicial secretary and I said, hi, my name's Laura Polizzi. I don't know any lawyers. I don't know what I'm doing. I am just starting law school and I need an internship. And she said, okay, do you want to start in June? And I said, thank you. And then that same girl, she came into my courtroom. It was maybe a couple weeks, it was probably 2 weeks before election day. She came into my courtroom and the judicial secretary that I said that to when I walked into that courtroom, her name's Vera. It was Vera Sinishai. She was the judicial secretary to Honorable Mark Switalski, who I clerked for. And now Vera is my judicial clerk. And she walked into my courtroom and it was somebody from the Latino community. This young girl's first name is Jimena. She walked into the courtroom and Vera was like, oh my God, she did exactly what you did. And I'm like, she did that because I just told her two weeks ago. That was really cool. And it was a real full circle moment. And it really does make an impact. That girl hasn't started law school yet and she doesn't know any lawyers. And I just think if people know that putting yourself out there and asking for what you want at a young age can help open a door and actually get you an internship or get your foot in the door, that's going to really have an impact on their confidence and how they move forward with their career at a young age. So I loved that experience and I hope that I can inspire some more young people like that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
can I just
please.
add- So we talk about putting your money where your mouth is. I walked into Judge Polizzi's court. That's how I met her the first time. All these bright-eyed young women that were just so on point. Like you could tell they were just like everything was regimented, everything was on point. I just thought it was so great. Every one of them, young women, she's saying, here, let me show you what I'm doing. Put her money, you know, they put your money where your mouth is. So I salute you on that, because that's a big deal. A lot of times people feel pressure. So, oh, let me go with this staffer because they've been here for 30 years or whatever, John Bob or whatever. No, I'm bringing in young women and people who can help do, and her, I guess your chief court, is it? Young African-American woman, very, very astute young lady. So I just appreciate you, Judge, for doing that, putting your money where your mouth is. So
Thank you. She was my assistant in private practice. Her name's Victoria, and she can run she ran my entire law practice. So I would be so sad one day when I would have her to help me run my, because I just love her.
there you go.
It's wonderful. It really is a full circle moment, something that we love to see and we love to hear about. My next question, I'm going to direct to Ms. Kaigler and Judge Polizzi, and this is something that, Judge, you did mention during your introduction. So we've often heard that members of marginalized communities have to work twice as hard and forge ahead, despite systemic obstacles. Do you think that it's necessary advice for success? And do you observe generational differences in how people respond to that advice?
I'll
Yeah, Ms.
start.
Kaigler, please.
I don't know that I work twice as hard. I just work hard. And I don't have anyone else to compare it to say, oh, you only did half and you made it. And I had to do 2 times that to make it. Whatever I did, I felt I was committed to it. I had a passion for it. And that's what I always tell young people, the aspiring attorneys, whether I had a young girl in the office a couple of months ago, and she was only 9. She wanted to be a judge, but when she left, she said, I think I want to be a lawyer. I can't be a lawyer first, but she was thinking of judge being, that was the official thing to do. But knowing what lawyers do and how I talked about practice, and Liz Rogers, one of my partners, who was a mentee, talked about practice. She said, I want to do that. But I never assumed that I was doing anything extra. I was just doing what I enjoyed, and I wanted to be excellent. And being, I mentioned what I did professionally, but in the meantime, I had a family. My oldest son was born 3 weeks after graduation, 6 weeks before the bar.
Wow.
No time for bar review, just, took it with what I knew, and then went right into work in that September, and worked 2 years, had another child, and then decided I couldn't go back because it was such a grueling practice. But going into work, I said, but I can't stay home and be a good lawyer. It's hard to just read it. You have to do it. So I just felt I had to practice. And so I opened an office, shared space with an accounting CPA, because I was very comfortable around accountants working with Arthur Young. And then one of my first clients was Dr. Charles Wright at the Wright Museum. And so he said, I heard you do some probate. I hadn't done more than maybe 2 cases, but I said, I'm sure I can help you. So that was the start. So you just went into the books, learned everything you needed to know about that area. So it was just trying to be the best. And then knowing that I had a limited time frame to work. I had kids. My husband was a professional. Was married by then, but didn't have the time to waste. I just said, you know what? I need to be the best in this area for people to come to me. So I wasn't looking at it that I was doing extra. I was just doing what I needed to be a good lawyer. And if you read the Code of Professional Responsibility, you shouldn't take anything that you are not competent, capable of doing. So you had to read it, do it, read it, do it. And so that has been my mantra since I started. So I never thought I was running a race against anyone else. It was just my own personal goals and ambitions, and fortunately selecting an area of practice that I just loved. And when I started out, I said, I wanted to find something I do, even if I didn't get paid for it. And that's how I feel about the practice area I'm in. I do it without getting paid. I work for a lot of hospice individuals, and so I don't get paid for that. It's just, brings joy to me. So I don't attribute it to competing with the guys, or I've got to outshine someone. Now, they may have a problem with me because they don't feel about the law like I do, and feel they've got to keep running the race to get to where they need to be. But I've been unfortunately asked that question by some seasoned partners, white men, who say, don't you feel lucky being a partner in this firm or heading the estate trust group for a firm like this? Don't you feel lucky? No, I work hard. You ask the white guy, does he feel lucky being a partner in a major firm? No. I'm proud of it, but not lucky. So I hope that.
Oh,
responds to-
absolutely, absolutely.
Just work hard,
Thank you.
do your best.
Judge
Yeah,
Polizzi.
I'll kind of piggyback on that. So a lot of people, when I got the judicial appointment from the governor, they said, well, who did you know? Well, I didn't know anybody. My dad retired from the UAW as a factory worker, and my mom was a secretary at Chrysler, so I didn't know anybody. I was the first lawyer in my family. I worked hard, and it's the same thing whether you're prepping for trial and you're in private practice, or whether you're applying for a judicial appointment, or whether you're running in an election. You don't know. This is kind of the benefit and the disadvantage, right? That I never knew how hard my opponent was working. So I worked as hard as I possibly could. And every time I'm put in that situation, I don't realize till I'm done how hard I actually pushed myself and how hard I actually worked. On election day, I stood outside from 6:45 in the morning because the polls opened at 7. And I did not leave the polls. I ate a sandwich while I stood outside talking to people. I stood there until 7:45 p.m. My friend pulled a dead bug out of my hair and said, she went like this to my head. I said, what was that? She said, it was a dead bug. You've been standing outside for 13 hours. You need to go sit down. And I said, what if I miss this election by 5 people? What if I lose by 10 people? Why would I leave? And she laughed. She said, you don't understand how big you're going to win this by. And I didn't. And I won every precinct. But when you are in a fight, and I'm just relating that to the election, because it was just, a couple weeks ago. But whenever I'm in something, I don't look at it like, oh, I'm gonna win, or I always think I'm gonna lose. When I prepped for trial, I always thought I wasn't prepared enough. For the appointment, I always thought, oh, I need one more endorsement. I didn't do enough. For the election, I was terrified. I thought I was going to lose. I knew that I worked hard because I was out there every single day knocking doors and doing everything I needed to do. There was never a point where I felt cocky or arrogant or like I worked enough and I could just stop. And I think that's so important is if you think your opponent, let's say, is doing 10 push-ups, do 15, because you just never know what they're doing. And it takes real guts to put yourself out there. And why would you do that if you're not going to give it 100%? Just always give it 100%. There's no reason not to. I do want to touch on something else, though, generationally. I think it's interesting in the practice of law, a lot of my mentors who were women of an older generation who I learned so much from said to me, you don't understand how lucky you younger women are, because we are not stepping on each other to get to the top. And that's how it was for them. And this is the way they described it to me, that there were so few women that were attorneys that they didn't help each other out as much as we do now. And this was a friend of mine that's a judge now. She said, I love this generation of female attorneys because you guys go out of your way to help one another and go out of your way to make sure each other succeed. And I just think that's wonderful. And we need to keep that spirit, not just with women, with attorneys in general.
Thank you both. And Mr. Barton, Dr. Griffin, anything to add here? No pressure at all.
I was just listening and I thought it was kind of on both sides of it, like, you know what? Yeah, I work twice as hard, and then the other one is, hey, I'm doing my thing and that will produce this twice as hard. And I agree with both concepts, you know, if that makes any sense. And I feel like they actually were leading to the same thing, you know, where it's like, where you were talking about how the women lawyers of this generation, I was talking to my wife about this. My wife is an accountant. She does all with novel women's business. And I was just like, can I come to a meeting? Like, y'all are so, this sisterhood of what they were trying to accomplish for this one particular event they had. So many people came and, I mean, not just women, men, and I mean, people of all walks of life. But they put an issue out there and everybody jumped to come and help. And I was just amazed. And so for me, when you talk about working twice as hard, I think we're cognizant of that. And we say, hey, look, all right, we're not going to just stay in our own silos and I'm at Dykema or wherever firm I'm at and I'm just going to, no, where are you? Okay, are they doing this with you? What's happening over there? Are you guys getting paid? What the prosecutor's office is offering this in this county. Why is this county not getting? Okay, what are the percentage of cases that are even being sent to trial in this county? Why they're being paid so much more versus this? Oh, what's the demographic of attorneys in this county versus this county? So yeah, I'm sorry if I kind of was circular, but I agree with both.
I would say we have some programming here at Detroit Mercy Law where we go into like middle schools, high schools, and undergrad institutions. We take faculty and we take current students to talk about careers in law. And I think I tell those students, you do have to work twice as hard. And it's just simply because I think with different younger generations, the work ethic is different. And so as we have AI and as we have social media, everything just looks. And so an important piece of that program is taking current students into those middles and high schools to say, law school is hard work. Undergraduate is hard work. And so getting them to understand that while you see everyone posting their accolades on social media and you see all of those things, that it's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And so especially for students of color or underrepresented or low income, you may be the first and you may not have the resources. So yes, you may have to work twice as hard. And I am a tough love kind of person. And so that's something that I want to stress to them. It's like, this is going to be hard work. Yes, it's going to be difficult. You may fail, but you'll pick yourself up. And so I do believe that we do need to work twice as hard and spread that message as in, it may seem flowery and rosy, and you may see all of the luxury, but it's hard work that it took to get there and prepare for it if you actually.
Thank you. I love the wide range of experience and advice that's given. And I do think the common theme is we are all preparation, hard work. I don't think any of us can deny, you know, being the most prepared in the room definitely helps you battle anyone underestimating you or otherwise. So,
Kristin,
yeah.
Can I just really quick, I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Yeah, please.
The generational thing, I just want to point out, especially for the younger folks out there, there are going to be different ways that you approach things. And you have to understand that some of us that are older, and I'm including myself in that, we may not understand the fight that you're facing. So again, I go back to that point of educating us as to how you want to go forward. I have some older attorneys who tell me, no, you got to do it this way, you got to do it that way. And I said, no, you know, I don't want to not see my children grow up so that I can be on a billboard. Like, why? Like, that doesn't, and my kids don't know who I am. So how I'm approaching practicing law is gonna be different than you, who decided I'm never gonna see my kids and I'll leave them with my wife all day, and when she comes home, I'll still be mad at her and we'll argue and fight over it. What? No, thank you. I don't want any of that. I'll work with my wife as a partner and we'll try and raise our kids as such and run our businesses appropriately. So that's the generational part.
And I can speak to that, being of that seasoned generation. Because I'm in the winter of my professional career. 50 years is a long time to practice, and I've seen it happen. But things have really not changed as much as people think they have. The same struggles that we had in the 70s, we have right now. And now we have a system that has gone back, is going back, trying to go back to the way it was in the 50s and 60s. And the difference now to me, the younger generation is that they're not prepared for that, because many of us have provided opportunities that don't allow them to know what the struggle is about. They have not been called names called out. I mean, my husband in dental school was told it was genetically impossible for him to get an A. But we've heard on the campaign trail, I'm not trying to be political, that people are dumb from birth. There's that kind of name calling. So what's old is new, what's new is old. And so young people aren't accustomed to those kinds of challenges that they're going to be facing in the workplace, or feeling that when you walk into a large firm that still has DEI opportunities, that things may be said, or not welcomed in. You walk by a partner's office and he or she keeps their head down. They don't even look up to greet you, knowing they can hear you walking down the hall. But they're going to be facing that. And in years past, that kind of tone wasn't acceptable in a firm. I mean, I'm fortunate to be with a firm or I wouldn't have been there this long. That's intolerable. You're not allowed to be rude or disrespectful of another human being. You'll be called out on that. But there's some places that isn't, and some of our young people aren't accustomed to it. And I feel very comfortable that I'm multi-generational, because I have children who are in that 40-something, and then I have grandchildren who are in that teen, early 20s. So I'm listening to them. I text my grandkids, you don't call them. I said, call me. What do you want to talk about, Nana? Well, I know the difference. I have clients. I'm working with clients. I have some clients where that file is 45 years old, 30 years old. So I'm working with their children's grandchildren. So it's very different now. I get that. And no, we can't. In our firm, you cannot say how we used to do it. That's a reason for dismissal. Like we did it that way in the day. This is a modern approach, but you can't discount the lessons from the past. And those things like working hard, and I don't know whether it's 2 times, 3 times, whatever number of times you want to call it, you got to work hard in the law to be good at it. And then whatever you do, if you're a teacher, my daughter has to stay up at night reading. She's learning new things she's a reading specialist, how to teach kids to read. You can't just assume I learned it in school. It's lifelong learning. So that, for some young people, is not part of their makeup. They're just thinking, I get it today, I'm gonna go out, hang out. I had a young lawyer, I said, let's meet for coffee. I don't have that time to go and hang out. She said, oh, no, we can go to happy hour. And she knew every place to go. You know, anyway. So it's a different, but I met her for happy hour. We hung out for a couple of hours. The next time it'll just be coffee. You know, I'm being facetious, but it's just a different space. And so I have young mentees, but they should have seasoned mentees as well, because we can grow that way. There's just a combo. It's like saying, I'm not going to listen to my grandma. Your grandmother has some good advice.
Right.
And so we've got to listen to each other. What we're trying to teach the grandmas, you've got to listen to the kids too,
Mhm.
and what they're saying.
It's such an important point, and it's such an important lesson to never forget our history and what's come before us. I know there's a lot of shock, myself included, and I think my generation and, you know, those that are younger than me as well, who have not experienced a lot of what you've been discussing. And so I think it's really important that we're sharing stories across generations and discussing these things, because this isn't the first time, like you said, that we face these kinds of challenges. Thank you. For my next question, I want to start with Dr. Griffin, but I definitely want to open it up to the rest of our panelists as well. Dr. Griffin, what do you believe is the proper role or response for a bystander or observer of systemic abuses? How does responding at all, whether right or wrong, make the recipient of that abuse feel? An example of this is, you know, maybe a boardroom situation where a woman is maybe slighted or something like that, and one of her male counterparts stands up and, you know, comes to her defense. I think a lot of us can see why that's a good thing, but why that may also cause some negative feelings for the woman as well. So I was just wanting to kind of get your opinion on this.
As Mr. Barton said before, we had the questions in advance, but this was really the question that I struggled with. And I'm struggling even more with it, having heard your experience of that's how you got your mentor and you were able to make connections. And so obviously, yes, it's important to have our allies and be allies. But my gut reaction, my initial thought is there's no proper role or response. I do DEI trainings and workshops, and I'm guilty of this. I spend a lot of time saying, yes, this is how we should respond to microaggressions, or this is how we should respond to these injustices. But I think my goal for 2025 is to spend less time figuring out how to respond to those and more of like, okay, how can we create an environment where those injustices and those actions just simply don't exist? And so let's not talk about how we can respond to microaggressions when they happen in the lounge. Let's just say, okay, well, how can we create an environment where those microaggressions just don't happen? Or how can we create a system and put people in power and put people in places where these systemic issues and things don't happen? And so I struggle with that, but I will honestly say, in short, I think there's no correct response, because I would say, obviously, in your instance, the woman was appreciative of the action. And so, yes, again, be allies, but who says that that woman can't stand up for herself or that person can't stand up for themselves? But then it's also, well, why does this person have to constantly stand up for themselves or educate or do these things? So I would say, can we spend more time really thinking about how can we end this abuse and end these injustices as to how to respond to it?
Instead of dissecting what the response is. I completely understand that.
That was great. You beat me to the point.
Sorry.
No. I thank you, because that was actually where I was going with it, because, you know, as a man, let me mansplain. All right.
Sure.
Let me mansplain women.
You gotta take all the,
Right,
you gotta
right.
move everything up the table.
I know, right? So, all jokes aside, no, as a man, it is difficult. And even in that situation, it was difficult for me to assert myself, because I don't want to diminish her power. But at the same time, like you said, at what point does she have to stop fighting on her own? Like when is the cavalry coming? you know? And I feel like if I'm just gonna sit here, I'd rather her be upset with me for having her back than for me not doing anything wrong. And if she's like, hey, you did too much, I got this, then that's an issue for me and my ego, and I can eat that one. Sorry, sis, it's my fault. No problem. However, maybe it's an ego thing. My ego can't take sitting back and watching injustice happen in front of me. That wouldn't happen. I would just, I'm sorry, yeah, you know, real quick, we had an expungement fair somewhere, and one of the attorneys that volunteered, young sister, she's probably like 2 years practicing or something like that. And I turn over because I hear this commotion, and she's going at it with this one guy or whatever. So I come over, the guy and his girlfriend. And I come over and I'm like, hey, you know, excuse me real quick. I'm trying to just, you know, calm it down because one, this guy is, he's a big dude or whatever. And he's talking aggressively to her in a way that I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. So even though she's standing there, she's standing her ground, I feel like if he could physically violate her, I'm going to put him down, period. And now I would be wrong if I'm not close enough to do that before there was an incident that occurred. So I jump over there, I get there. She gets mad at me because she's like, well, hold on. Why are you coming and correcting me? And I'm like, Sid, I'm not coming to correct you. I promise you I'm not. I'm only here to make sure that there's no physical interaction between you and this brother. I'm not gonna hit her. I know you're not. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to her. Like, I'm not worried about, I'm here now. I know you're not gonna hit her. But I'm resolving this situation. Fast forward later on, I see her and we're actually cool. She actually might be doing work for my firm, but we're cool. But we always go back to that one moment where she was like, man, I thought you were coming over to try and correct me and I was about to let you have it. And I'm like, I just came to make sure you were good. So that is the exact same scenario that we always, especially as a man, I always struggle with. Should I go? Should I stay? It's not my place, but at the same time, if it's getting physical, I'm there. I don't care what's going on. Like, I'm there. Hey, what's happening? But other than that, if it's like an argument or something like that, I usually try to stay in my lane.
Thank you, Mr.
It
Barton.
depends if there's a power play. You
Mhm.
are the person in the room, man or woman, and you're the supervisor or have an official role. Or the person has one over the other they're talking about. At this point in my life, there's nothing that I'm gonna let you say to make me mad or offend somebody. There are red lines. And so that you have to interrupt in a professional way, whether you change the subject or just point it out. You don't want to embarrass anyone because the other person just may not have good manners and know that that's not the right way to approach it. But you look at that as well, especially if it's in a law firm, a young associate, and they're presenting a report. Maybe they flubbed it. Maybe they just didn't get it right, but you know their skill set, you trust that they're really working hard. And someone makes fun of them or does something offensive or whatever it might be. You need to speak up. I don't think that's one that you can let go. But in other instances, maybe it's changing the subject or waiting till after the meeting, talking to the individual who did that. He or she may not even realize what happened. And then the person who was offended, then you need to let them know. But when it occurs in my presence, I always let them know I was offended by that.
Yeah.
Not just that the person that they were directing it to. I'm not comfortable with that. I just make it real clear that doesn't work for me. So we've got to figure a better way to deal with the similar situation. So you take the onus on yourself and become a true ally for injustice.
And I want to start off by saying, when I think about confrontation, I think we have to let young people know that having a confrontation is not automatically a negative thing.
Right.
Yes, right.
We can confront people for any reason about anything, and you can make it an interaction that is palatable and you can make it an interaction that is impactful in a positive way. And I think that it's very important that people get comfortable with that, especially attorneys or even non-attorneys that are just professionals. Being confrontational is a good thing, as long as you can do it tactfully, positively. And, you know, to piggyback on Mr. Barton's story, it's important that you make sure the person understands your intentions.
Right.
Like, hey, wait a minute, my intention was this, not how you're taking it. So that they understand you weren't coming at them with something negative. Or like, Ms. Kaigler said that, you know, she will state that I am offended by that. You know, you never have to raise your voice to get your point across, ever. Whether you're a judge, an attorney, no matter what, you never have to be rude either. You can just say what you want to say and just say it boldly, and that's enough. Something else I wanted to say that I think I heard a quote recently that I really liked, and it stands out in my mind. And it was that it takes nothing to stand amongst the crowd, but it takes everything to stand alone. And I think a lot of young people feel that, oh, if I confront somebody or if I speak my mind, they're shuddering, you know, thinking, oh God, I'm putting myself out there. But that's how you need to get comfortable doing that, because that's how you learn who you really are. And if people don't celebrate you, then what do they say? Go into another room where they do. Be true to who you are. And I think really an important thing is always acting with the utmost integrity. I have two little kids. I have a 1-year-old and I have a 3-year-old. And, you know, my kids are not going to remember anything about this process that I just went through. They have no idea. But I hope that one day they know that I'm a person of integrity and that everything I do, I intend to do in a positive way. And then that's going to take me back to my recent election experience. So with that, you know, they talked about, one of them mentioned about the cavalry coming in. So I was attacked publicly, and as a judge, I had to not respond. I could not respond to it. That was very different, because as a litigation attorney, and you guys can tell I'm not shy, okay? And as an attorney who was in litigation for so many years, I would naturally have walked up to the person and said, listen, I don't like what you just did, and here's why. You know, it lacks integrity.
Right.
It is unprofessional, blah, 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 whatever I would have said. And in this scenario, I couldn't, because I'm a seated judge and this is my election, and this piece of paper hit every mailbox that I know of in my district, and it's something disparaging about me. And I sat back and I looked at it, and I got it out of my own mailbox, and when I looked at it, I laughed, and I just said, well, I guess we'll find out what how people will take this. And as I did nothing and just took the high road, the cavalry came running in, and all of the attorneys were making public posts, making comments to one another. You know, I was getting calls with endorsements from judges on the west side of the state.
Wow.
I was getting donations from attorneys who aren't even attorneys in the state of Michigan. People from Cooley Law School, contacting me. You know, so it's really amazing when you do the right thing, and that's what you stand for, and you don't engage when somebody is throwing mud at you. When you can't engage, let's say, if somebody's throwing mud at you. It's really wonderful to know that there's so many of us in this profession who will stand up and who will help a colleague. That was really wonderful to see.
Can we add for
Yeah.
the judge that they doctored a picture of her, which goes into, I mean, there's so many levels of disrespect in doctoring a picture and where it can go. When someone told me about what happened with Judge Polizzi, I guess from being a former prosecutor, my mind went straight to some type of assault. Not to say it that way, but that they assaulted her. And that's what it was. That's similar to what occurred. That is, I'm trying not to use the term properly, but that was an assault. if you think about what they did to her picture and what they would do to other women's picture, what they could do to a minority person's picture by changing the hue and things of that nature to discourage voter turnout. There's so many things that were incorrect about what happened with you. So when I found out about it, yeah, I wanted to be part of it. I was late. I didn't even know. I was late to the Calvary. I'm still mad. Like, I'm trying to reach out to the people behind the scenes off the record. Okay, but that's it.
No, thank you for adding that, Mr. Barton, because my next comment was gonna be, what happened to you, Judge Polizzi, and the attack mailer is a big part of why we wanted to have this event and why we were so grateful that you were willing to sit on this panel and also share your experience. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, and, you know, for the record, I just want to say there was multiple attack mailers.
Yeah.
More than just one.
More than just one.
More than just one.
And what do you think if someone is sexist like that? What's the percentage or probability that they're also probably racist or ageist or whatever it is? What is it? It's probably high.
And I will say, I apologize for being late here today, because I do district court work, right? So my docket is a lot of people in the community who might not have an education, who are minorities, who, some of them don't speak English. I have a lot of translators that come. And most of the time, the district court is the community's first contact with the court. So if they are not treated fairly, in essence, district courts are basically the people's first experience for the court system. We're the face of the court system for many people. So if they're not treated fairly with respect and kindness, what does that say about our profession?
Thank you. Very, very salient point. And I want to just go back to your point too, Ms. Kaigler, about taking the onus on ourselves. I think that's definitely been expressed throughout all of us and being an ally and really putting it on yourself to say, we are all offended by what happened, you know, and we're all going to stand together and be allies for each other. So thank you. I think this all brings us, wraps us up real nice for our last question here that I do want to direct to each of our panelists. So this past election cycle, we saw aspects of identity weaponized against people in different harmful and seemingly effective ways. We've also seen a major blurring of lines between political speech, beliefs, and racist, sexist, harmful rhetoric. How do you plan to protect yourself and still progress in this environment? And what advice would you have for law students or early practitioners in similarly navigating this landscape?
Interesting.
Do you want to start, Mr. Barton?
I feel like I'm like the lesser on the panel, so if you guys are all right with that, I will. So this one is difficult, right? How do you continue in this environment without getting political? Well, no, I will get political. I always tell people this when the election was going on. I said, I'm a young, and this is relative. I'm a young Black man in America. There is no party that is for me. There is no agenda that's out here. They're like, we're gonna do this. No, what I'm doing is continuing on my path to bring light to the issues that affect my community and then outward. So that's all we can do. So when people are, I get that a lot of people are upset, or some people are upset that Trump is in versus Ms. Harris. Whereas for somebody like myself, again, a young Black male, I always think, how are these policies going to affect us? So when I see, you know, the omnibus crime bill or something like that, 3 strikes or any of these things coming out, the first thing I'm thinking of is what young Black community, what young Black men are going to be subject to this. So when I look at this election, regardless of the outcome, I know that whoever would have won, and I know people are like, well, there's a difference. I'm not saying there's not a difference. Whoever would have won, I still am going to have to come out here and mentor young boys on the East Side. I'm still going to have to talk to my sons about what they need to do to overcome systemic racism. all of these things. I'm still gonna have to mind my business when my wife is running her business. And she's like, no, I got this. Don't, I think we were talking about that earlier with the Calvary. Like, sometimes she doesn't want a Calvary. Sometimes she just wants a sounding board so that she can go back and handle her business as she needs to. So all of those things are still gonna occur. And my advice for the young law students is to still be yourself, listen to the older generation that's giving you advice, but at the same time, you have to make sure that you're setting the path for yourself, because the older generation is not gonna be able to tell you what's in front of you. They're gonna tell you the history so that you can fight what's in front of you, see it before it happens. But there's gonna be the internet, all these things, there's TikTok, there's different things that are facing your generation, meaning the younger folks, than their generation. Very last point, my uncle, when we were growing up, he said, man, we used to have to fight. I didn't, it was never guns when we were kids. And I'm like, yeah, it's different. This isn't your generation. So you need to understand the advice you're giving us. Like, you gotta go out there and you handle it and you fight this guy. Don't be afraid. They're not fighting anymore. They're shooting. So we need a different route to understand how to maneuver through that. That's my advice.
I'll say, I guess in short, I'll continue to do the work. My dissertation focused on Black women's obstacles and PWIs. I research obstacles. I work in higher education. Like, this is my life mission. Like, when I graduated and realized, like, oh, there were no Black women, I was like, okay, well, let me become that Black woman in education. So I feel like I have to continue this work. And it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge, and I'm obviously going to have to get creative in the work, but I still believe in it and believe that it's important. So with that, I guess tangibly, I am putting on my armor and preparing for the worst. So, I'm gonna save money to be sure, whatever happens, that there's a nest egg. I'm gonna drink water and practice self-care and journal and do all the things that I can do so that I can be whole, so that I can continue to do the work. Because it's not gonna be easy. So being sure, that I have on all of my armor to be able to do it. And I would say, I would encourage students to honestly do the same. Put your armor on, figure out a strong why, because that's gonna be the thing that keeps you going when things are tough or when the odds don't seem to be in your favor. So figure out that strong why, but also, be careful about pushing your passion. Be careful about what you write, who you talk to, who you associate with, because those things do stay with you, and you never know, like, who's listening, who's watching, who's reading. So figure out your why and be strategic in the work that you do so that you can continue to do it and feel self-fulfilled, and be sure that you're not being in a place where you have to pour from an empty glass.
Well, elections have consequences. And this one, because I'm alive today, is the most consequential. And it's going to have a very dramatic impact on my life, my children's and my grandchildren's lives. It'll have an impact on my community. I live in Detroit. It'll have impact on each of you, because you drink water, you breathe air. So we're living in a society where climate change is an issue, and some people don't believe in science. And it's a very traumatic time for women, because women's rights have been infringed upon. And so it is not one that is going to be the same for me, because the judicial system is dramatically different than when I went to school. Supreme Court is dramatically different. And I'm speaking for Shirley Kaigler, not for Tab, not for anyone else I'm representing. I am speaking for Shirley Kaigler, because I learned law differently than it's being practiced today. So I continue to tell young people to reread, who are jurists, want to be jurists, the Code of Professional Responsibility. Read it, reread it. I just got sworn into the Supreme Court last week. And it was very difficult for me to sit there and look at the jurists the justices, because they don't represent the view of the law that I learned in 1972 to 75. I believe in justice, equality, fairness. I believe in honesty and integrity. That was the word my kids learned when they were very young. Be a person of integrity. If you ask any of them now, my oldest son will be 50 next year, what does your mother stand for? She's a woman of integrity. All of them would tell you that. And so I don't see that happening in our judicial system and leadership, because it's following a political agenda. So it makes a difference who you vote for, what you stand for. And at this point in our lives, it's going to be very difficult for a lot of young people to have the success that they're dreaming of, because racism is outright, it's out in the street. And this is the first time in my life I've been truly afraid to go in certain parts of the country, but certainly in certain parts of our state. You just heard about what happened in Howell. That is not allowable. That's not free speech. And when I was a child, my parents, the one way we got out of poverty was through reading, education. When you ban books, that means that you're not able to learn, completely learn. You're only learning what they want you to see and hear. So if you choose a government that dictates that, then you're choosing a different way of life. If you have to tell people, well, watch what you say, watch what you do. We're supposed to be free in universities to communicate. And it's fearful now for a lot of people. It's fearful for some young people to be in a firm and express their view, their right to life, or you're not, or whatever your view is, because you don't know if that means you're going to get a pink slip. And there won't be any recourse in the court system, because we're putting judges in who don't hear what the law says. They're listening to an agenda. So it's very different right now. And I'm still part of the struggle, and I am looking forward to being part of the resistance and moving forward. And one of my goals is to work with young people, whether they're in the law or not, but to teach them how to be civically engaged. We used to teach civics in school. I don't know if they do that anymore. People don't know why they vote, how governments work. You pick the wrong government. Someone who doesn't believe in science or medicine will say kids don't get vaccines. What's going to happen? I mean, that's the kind of thing that I'm saying. We need to know what our dollars are going for, and we need to know exactly what our elected officials will do. And the grants that go out are going to be for safety, for care, just food service for kids. You're saying teach them, start in high school to teach them or tell them about the law. But you need to start in kindergarten by making sure kids are fed when they go to school. They're hungry, they're not going to learn. So those are all the things that I view. And as a lawyer, I feel responsible. Again, that's what we learned between 72 and 75, and it didn't end. We continue that. And if you're going to be a good lawyer, you're going to have a fruitful practice, you've got to keep going back to that and say, that's what my role is. That's what my job is. That's how I'm going to practice law. And so that's where I'm going with it. I will be engaged with young people, not just telling them to be a lawyer, but saying look at your government, start early, volunteer, go to town halls, try to understand what's happening in your community, and working with unwed mothers, saying get on the school board, go to the meetings, and then maybe they'll run for something. Kids get older, then they'll say, I know how the council works, I'll volunteer. The next thing you know, they're going to be on a commission. The next thing you know, they may be on the city council. So that's what we need to do to make sure people know how our government works. We're lawyers, that's what we're supposed to do.
All right. So
I'm on my soapbox.
No, that was good.
I'll go after that. That was great.
I am wild.
Well, my response to this is gonna be a little different because, judges are bound by the judicial canons and I cannot speak about any partisan politics. However, I think that it's important for young kids, and I've said the word integrity a lot too. It's so important, again, kind of thinking about that from the perspective of a young person saying, you know, you have to get comfortable being bold, having confrontations and not feeling like the word confrontation is something negative, because it's not. Being bold, sticking up for yourself, just stating your views. You don't have to do it aggressively. You can do all of these things without ever raising your voice or yelling. You know, staying true to who you are and really focusing on integrity. What does integrity mean to you? Who are you? You know, and then looking at your goals. I think this is so important too. I met with somebody many years ago and he said to me, something like, dig deep to figure out why you want what you're chasing. Why is it important to you? Figure that out, and that helps you launch forward to achieve that goal so much more aggressively than you would have if you didn't take that time to figure out your why. So really figure out that why. Engaging in the community. So there's so many lawyers who become attorneys and do their job and they go home, and that's fine. I realize, you know, life is crazy. There's so many things going on, especially, you know, people have children and families, but do your best to get involved. I got involved with the Women Lawyers Association when I was a brand new lawyer, and I met my former law partner. I met some of my closest friends. I started a women's golf league. I did not know how to golf. My husband told me, well, you got to get some golf lessons. And I came home 2 days later and I said, I started a golf league. He said, that's not what I told you. And I said, it'll be fine. And, you know, that's how I met so many women in the community, just by being bold, putting myself out there and just having fun being who I am. And people appreciate you for that. So stay true to who you are, have integrity, get involved in organizations. Your bar associations are so impactful. Through Women Lawyers Association, to piggyback on Ms. Kaigler, as through Women Lawyers Association, I was sworn into the United States Supreme Court a couple years ago, and it's such a wonderful experience to be able to do that. I was actually, at the time, I brought my son, who's now 3, I brought him with me. My mom came, my husband came, and I was pregnant with my second son. So that was really special to me to have that experience with my family and to, you know, be able to tell them about that when they're older, that their mom, who, you know, was the first person in their family to get a college education, was able to do that through hard work. So you can do anything you want, just do it well and be positive, and you'll go far.
Thank you all. Such incredible advice. And definitely, I've taken down so many notes and so many nuggets that I'm like, oh, I'm going to keep that with me. And I wrote down Judge Polizzi's quote, and it's just such a meaningful discussion. And I honestly hate that we're past time, because I could talk to the 4 of you, and I'm sure we all feel the same, forever, probably all night. But I did just want to leave us with a few of, I think, what I took, some salient points from our panelists. Being bold, standing up for what we believe in, acting, putting your money where your mouth is, supporting one another, keeping the onus on ourselves and being allies for one another. And like Dr. Griffin said, putting on our armor so that we can tackle what comes next and we can do it together. Thank you all for being here, and all my friends on Zoom. I really appreciate it. A very special thank you, though, to our panelists who volunteered their time and shared their experiences. We really appreciate you. Can we give them a round of applause? So again, unfortunately, this concludes our discussion, but I know that we will see a lot more from our panelists in our community and from all of you too. So